Welcome back to my channel, baddies. On today's episode, I'm going to teach you guys how to make a fabric V-split. I really want to keep this one. I know I always say it's my favorite one, but I love this one so much. But anyway, you guys, I'm going to teach you guys how to make this little beauty pie right here. It was really fun to make this tutorial. I hope that I explained it perfectly for you guys. If you have any questions, please leave comments. I try to always go back and read the comments. Your guys' feedback helps me create better content in the future. After all, these tutorials are for you guys. And I love you guys. Thank you for the love and support, and thank you for coming to watch my tutorial. I just love you guys. Besitos. I'm about to teach you how to make the fastest V-split. Throw your fabric on top of your cup and then move your hands around. Abracadabra, sakara, sakara. Just kidding. We actually have to do the work. Moving right along. Okay, guys, so you want to pick two fabrics that you think go together. I think both of these go together perfectly. I just love the way they look. Now, I feel like I have done already kind of two fabric tumbler tutorials, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about the fabric part. If you guys want to go back and watch my fabric tumbler tutorial, I'm sure it will be super helpful. Also, let's have a little drinking game. Take a drink every time I say fabric. Anyway, guys, as you know, I always use Mod Podge and my little paintbrush that I got at Michael's. I like to attach the fabric one section at a time. Just because I feel like it gives me more movement over the fabric. I feel like I always say this every time I do a tutorial, so I'm so sorry. But what I have to remind myself is that there's always going to be new people watching my tutorials, maybe people who are beginners. So even though I feel like I'm repeating myself every single time, this is information that someone is hearing for the first time. So please bear with me, you guys. So I'm going to go section and section at a time. Slowly rubbing the Mod Podge with my paintbrush. I feel like YouTube should pay me extra for singing. What do you guys think? Because I feel like if I sing a lot, you really can't tell the difference between me and Mariah Carey. Like, I feel like we have the same kind of voice. Like, I can make my voice go really high, like, anyway, guys, I'm so sorry. I got distracted. But moving right along, we're just going to also, wow, I'm a hypocrite. I literally said I'm not going to go into detail about applying the fabric because I've already done this multiple times. And here we are going into detail. Wow, how long have I been fake? Fake alert. Anywho, guys, so we're basically just going to go all around the tumbler. And sometimes I put a little bit too much Mod Podge and it I don't want to say the word squirt. That's not the right word. It oozes out and the top part of the fabric feels all sticky. So I always take a paper towel to just kind of rub off any of that Mod Podge that oozed out. I don't like the words I'm using, but you know what I mean. My least favorite part, you guys, I don't know why my X-Acto knife hates me, and I've tried so many. My blade is sharp. I don't know. You know, it's just not my strong point. No matter how deep I try to cut, I always have to go back with my fabric scissors just to recut that line. But it's okay. That doesn't make me any less gangster. But once that's done, I just make sure that the seam lines up good. And honestly, guys, the seam is always going to show no matter what. I mean, you're bringing fabric together. It's impossible to hide it, but always be cautious of the fabric you choose because in some fabrics, it's less noticeable. Then I'm going to cut the excess fabric off of the bottom of the tumbler. I do this so that when I cut the little flaps, I don't like the word flap. When you cut the little, flap is the only word I can think of. When you cut the little flaps to bend it over, not bend it over. Gosh dang it. I wish I was better at English. When you fold it over, you're going to want the flaps to be really, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with that. Anyway, we're going to come up to the rim. And I'm going to rest my scissors up on the rim and I'm just going to cut around really closely, as close as possible. And then I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to do next. We are going to secure the fabric and make sure that it's very adhered to the top of the tumbler. This is super important. I know I've already said this a million times, you guys, but this is something that I will not get tired of repeating, because if you don't have a proper seal, the tumbler is not going to last. Epoxy is going to get in there. Water is going to get in there when it gets washed. And we're definitely trying to avoid that. So I always reinforce the rim. I just go around with my little paintbrush and my Mod Podge. And I make sure that I'm pressing down. I'm making sure that there's plenty of glue in there. And this just always helps me just know that I'm getting a really good seal and that I'm not going to have any issues in the future. After I am done applying the glue, I always go back with I either use my finger or the palm of my hand to just kind of press really hard, really hard, guys. I can't stress that enough. I make sure that I squeeze any glue out so there's no excess glue in there. And I just make sure the fabric is like really pressed up against the top rim of the tumbler. This just helps me ensure that I have a really good seal, guys. And I know I say that a lot. I sound like a broken record, but cannot stress that enough. Anyway, we're moving on to the bottom. Angle your tumbler, make little flaps. Oh my God, I hate that word. Make little flaps all around the tumbler. You guys know what? I'm about to make you a promise. I am gonna buy a thesaurus, okay, and find better words to use. But anyway, guys, you want to make tiny little flaps. The smaller, the better, because then when you fold that fabric over, you're not going to have those sharp little pointy fabric corners at the bottom, which are super hard to cover with epoxy. You do not want that. You want the bottom of the tumbler to be as rounded out as possible. And the way to achieve that is to have very small flaps. Also, tell me you didn't put glue all over your hands when you were little, let it dry, and then peel it off in front of your classmates and pretend you were peeling off your skin. I always used to do that and it used to freak people out. Maybe that's why I had no friends. Anywho, guys, before we move on to our next step, which is going to be applying the second fabric design to the tumbler, we're going to seal it once with Mod Podge. I'm doing this just to be safe. I've never done a fabric V-split, so I'm kind of just going with the flow, I guess. But I just really wanted to seal the fabric at least once before going in and applying that V with fabric. So go ahead and seal your tumbler once. Do a thin coat of Mod Podge. Gosh, now I don't even know how to say it right. And then let it dry. Let it dry completely until the glue is completely clear and until you can touch it. And then we're going to move on to our second fabric part, which I'll show you guys how to do in just a minute. Now I know a lot of you guys are super like precise with measurements and stuff like that. Guys, I'm just not like that. Like, I don't want to blame it on my mom, but you know, even in recipes, I don't do measurements. My mom's like, put a little pinch of salt. And I'm like, okay, like, so I'm just not wired that way, but you can use a ruler or whatever you want. Here's my dandy little flappy thing from Joann's that you cut fabric on so you don't ruin your table. So what I'm going to do is I angle my fabric and I just cut in the shape of a V. Like I said, I didn't use a ruler or anything like that. I just eyeballed it. And also don't worry too much about the edges of the V being perfect, because remember that we are going to put vinyl strips and it's going to hide any imperfection. So don't worry too much about that. This V looks good to me, so I'm going to use it like that. If you guys want to use a ruler or anything like that, go ahead. That is perfectly fine. I'm just showing you guys how I do it. We are now going to add that a V-shaped or triangle-shaped fabric that we cut out to our tumbler. This is what's really going to pull it all together, you guys. Like, this is where your design really comes together. So what I'm going to do is I just place the fabric on the tumbler, figure out exactly how low I want it to go. And then I took my little Mod Podge bottle and I just squeezed glue down the very center, just because I wanted to be able to make sure that triangle fabric was straight and it was in the center before I adhered the rest of the fabric to the tumbler. So I just took my paintbrush, my little paintbrush that I got at Michael's, Joann, Hobby Lobby, they have it everywhere. And I took the fabric and I placed it on the tumbler. A lot of the fabric, I think I used a lot of glue so it like oozed through, but that's okay, you guys. I just took a paper towel and wiped it right off so that it didn't, you know, maybe not dry clear or something. Not that it wouldn't, but you know, my paranoid little brain was like, ooh, wipe it off just in case. So I pressed down really good. I made sure it was straight. Here's a tip. Always stand your tumbler up on your table just so that you can see and make sure that it's straight when the tumbler's sitting up, because God forbid you put on your fabric and then when you're done and you sit up your tumbler on a table and the V is crooked. That would suck. So I just always double check. Once I had my center secure, I moved on to the sides and I basically put the glue directly on the fabric. This is kind of messy, guys. I kind of wish I would have used gloves because I was peeling glue off my fingers for like hours after that. But anyway, we move on to the sides and I just kind of make sure that I have Mod Podge everywhere. I did way too much Mod Podge, so it like came through the fabric, but it's okay because after I pressed it down, I just took my paper towel and removed any of that excess glue. And just made sure that there was no lumps, that there was no bumps, and that my second piece of fabric was really adhered. And for a moment when I was doing this, I was like, do these fabrics clash? Because like in my head, does that ever happen to you that you have like an idea and you're like, oh, this is gonna be so sick, so badass. Ooh, I can't wait. And then you start doing it and you're like, ooh, I don't know if it looked nicer in my head. So I was like, oh my gosh, are these fabrics clashing? Because like I had a vision, but I was like, I don't know how I like them now that they're together. But I trusted the process and thank goodness I did because I abso-freaking-lutely love the outcome of this tumbler. But anyway, guys, you're gonna repeat the same process for both sides of the tumbler, which is to put Mod Podge on the fabric, press it down, get any lumps and bumps out. You could take your paper towel to press it down. And then we are gonna move right along to cutting the excess fabric off of the rim. Sure, by now you guys already know the deal. You guys know the process. I cut all the excess fabric off of the rim of the tumbler. And I do this by resting my scissors. I just think that's the best way to like cut a straight line is if you put your scissor directly on the rim and then just kind of cut that way. It just always helps me get a really close cut. So that's what I always do. So I basically just cut off all the excess fabric and I am going to repeat the exact same process that I would or that I did when I applied the fabric initially, which is to take my brush and my glue and get in there, make sure that the second piece of fabric is really adhered. Make sure that I'm not going to have any issues with a seal or anything like that because guys, we're working too hard for our cup knot to work out, right? Right? Who's with me? So once you have that part secured, go in and just apply pressure with the palm of your hand, your finger. Make sure that you have that like excess glue squeezed out of there. Make sure that it's really on there. And then go ahead and move on to the sealing process because guys, remember that is super important. You want to make sure that you seal your fabric. Now, I'm not going to show you guys all of the layers I did because you guys don't want to watch me do that, but I did seal 3 more times on top of the second piece of fabric because I normally seal 3 times. So to get a 3rd seal over that top fabric, I ended up doing 3 coats over this. So total, it was 4 coats because we did that 1 coat before we applied the second piece of fabric. Wow, that was like a tongue twister, but hopefully it makes sense to you guys and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment. I always do my best to read all of the comments. I try to reply to as many comments as I can because after all, this content is for you guys. You guys are important to me and I want to make sure that my instructions are clear and that you guys are understanding what I'm saying. And most importantly, that you guys are able to recreate these tumblers if you guys want to, without having to be confused or rewatch the tutorial a ton of times. So that's always the end goal. After you've applied your 3 coats and it's completely dry, this is what it should look like, you guys. And what we're gonna do next is we're gonna get a layer of epoxy before we move on to our vinyl strips. Once we have that first coat of epoxy on there, we are going to move on to the next step, which is going to be to pick out vinyl. A tip that really works for me is I take the colors that I think are going to look good and I kind of hold them up against the tumbler just to make sure that my color combo is going to like work out really good. And then once I make the final decision on the vinyl colors, I move on to my design space. If you guys want to know in detail how I make these strips, you can refer back to my V-split tumbler tutorial. I'll link it in the description. I explain in detail how I create these vinyl strips, and I will put the measurements of these in the description so that you guys know what size I did. So then what I'm going to do, you guys, is I'm going to cut these out. I'm going to cut the thicker ones out of the gold vinyl. And then I am going to cut the thinner ones out of the blue vinyl. And I added this little clip of my Cricut because, I don't know, I just thought it would be cool. Plus, I wanted you to look at my wieners. I'm sorry. I hope you guys never get tired of my lame jokes. Ooh, look at my wiener go. Hee hee. Anyway, you guys, here's a clip of me cutting the blue vinyl so you could look at my wieners again. Guys, who doesn't love wiener dogs? They're just so cute and they're long and they have tiny little legs. Look at that little face. Okay, be serious, you guys. Gosh, this is a professional tutorial. Anyway, guys, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lightly sand the bottom of the tumbler. I want to start to get it smooth, just so that I don't have to do a million coats of epoxy. And it's pretty smooth. I just felt a tiny little bit of prickly, pointy corners. And so I just wanted to smooth those out as much as I possibly could, so that I could have a really smooth, round bottom. Okay, I meant on the tumbler, not on me. Anyway, guys. I mean, who doesn't want a smooth round bottom, right? Oh, don't be lying. You know you do. So once I have it sanded, I take a baby wipe and I just wipe any of that residue off. And then I dry it off with a paper towel. And then we are ready to apply our vinyl strips. I'm going to go in with gold first. Also, guys, I'm really sorry that there's a flare from my ring lights. I'm going to try to see if I can find a solution for that. But I do apologize. Hopefully it's not too hard for you to see. But basically, I placed it right in the middle of the 2 fabrics to hide, to hide that line, to hide that transition. And then when you make your slit at the top rim, you want to cut just underneath the rim so that you're able to get a really good seal over that vinyl. And then you're going to repeat the process for the second side and do the same thing. Go right under the rim because you want that epoxy to go over the vinyl and adhere to the stainless steel so that you have a good seal. Guys, I can't stress that enough. I'm going to make myself a shirt that says, get a good seal, get a good seal. No. Anyway, guys, so now I'm just making the little, I don't know if incision is the right word, making the little cuts in my vinyl to make sure that I have a very pointy V. And then we're going to move on and go right in with our navy blue. And we're going to do the exact same process, you guys. We're going to place it right over that gold vinyl line. Make sure that it's as centered as possible. And then once we get to the top corner, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to cut just underneath the top rim because we want a really good seal. We're going to repeat that process for both sides. Guys, in my opinion, whenever you're doing this style tumbler, adding the vinyl strips is what pulls the whole look together. It is what could make or break. And if you choose colors that, my best advice is if you ever choose colors and you put them on and they don't look good, sure, sometimes it's annoying to have to start over. But guys, the vinyl strips are what make your final product or break it. So if you put something on a tumbler and you're not in love, take that extra 10-15 minutes to redo it because you will thank yourself that you did. I really loved the colors and that I chose, though. I thought they went perfectly with this tumbler. So that is what I stuck with. We now need to seal our vinyl with a coat of epoxy. And once this is completely dry, we're going to move on to the sanding part. Guys, the sanding part is super important in this step because I'm hoping that the coat of epoxy that I apply after this is going to be my final coat. So I just want to make sure that the bottom is really smooth and round, just like my bottom. Just kidding. I wish it's more of like a pancake. But anyway, so I just want to make sure that I don't have any pointy corners, that the bottom is just really smooth. And also very important, I feel like I haven't talked about this, but I'm going to be working on a Tumblers for Beginners video soon. But something that you always want to make sure is that the very bottom part of your tumbler is flat. You want to make sure that you sand it as good as you can, because you want to make sure that whenever you finish your tumbler and you set it on a table, you don't want it to rock back and forth because the bottom is uneven. You always want to make sure that it is flat. So now I'm just going to take my 60 grit sanding block. You can find these at Lowe's, Amazon, Home Depot. I like the 60 grit for when I'm doing the rim and the bottom, because it helps me get like a smoother finish without having to sand forever. And then I take my X-Acto knife. Guys, make sure you point your X-Acto knife inside the tumbler, just in case your hand were to slip or something like that. You don't want to slice your finger off. So I always point my X-Acto knife down into the cup. And then once I remove that excess epoxy, I just go in with my sanding block just to make sure that if there's any little bit of residue left, spray paint, Mod Podge, maybe if I left a little bit of epoxy, I'm just removing that with my sanding block. And the next step I'm going to show you is super important. You want to take your sanding block and angle it. Do you see how I'm angling it down like this? This is extremely important because this is how we are going to get that good seal. And especially right now that we have layer 2 fabrics, one on top of the other, we want to make sure that we have that really good seal. So I angle my sanding block and I start to sand. And what the purpose of this is to expose just a tiny little strip of stainless steel. Because when I go over to seal my tumbler, I'm going to have this little strip for the epoxy to adhere to, and that's going to create, see, you can see that little strip of stainless steel. That is going to create that nice seal over the fabric. So just do this all around your tumbler. It usually only takes me like 5 minutes, maybe not even that. I just sand at an angle until I have a nice little thin piece of stainless steel exposed all around the tumbler. And then once I do this, guys, I'm going to move on and show you guys how I do the bottom of my tumblers. Once it's all done and sanded, I wipe it with a baby wipe and then I dry it with a paper towel. Make sure I remove any residue. We don't want any of that showing up in our epoxy. I'm going to take black acrylic paint and a small paintbrush, as small as you can get it, so that you can maneuver around the bottom of the tumbler easily. So what I do is I take the edge of my brush and I kind of turn my cup as I'm painting. And what I try to do is create a circle at the bottom of the cup. Now, do not be hard on yourself. We're freehanding this. Your circle is never going to be exactly perfect. Just try to get it as nice as you can. Make sure that you don't get any paint on the side of the tumbler. We don't want that to show. This is strictly for the bottom. And I have just found that this is the best and easiest way to finish the bottom of my tumblers. I don't want to do glitter on the bottom because I don't want to make it thicker and have to add even more epoxy. So I always do paint. I try to do whatever color paint kind of matches the tumbler. My favorite is when I can use black because black has a really good coverage. So I usually only have to do one coat of paint when I'm using black versus if I'm using like a light pink or a white or something like that. So now we're going to let the acrylic paint dry completely. And once it's completely dry to the touch, then you guys can go ahead and move on to the next step, which is to seal our beautiful fabric V-split tumbler with a coat of epoxy. And once that coat of epoxy is dry, you guys are ready. You guys are done. You can let this cure and then put your beverage in there and then walk around Target showing off your new V-split tumbler. And then when Susan asks you where you got it, you could be like, "Oh, Susan, this is a limited edition. This is the only one in the world. You can't find anything like this. As a matter of fact, this was imported from France." I'm just kidding, but you know what I'm saying. All right, ladies, now we have our final coat of epoxy on here and we are done with this tumbler. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the love and support. You guys are amazing. You guys light my soul on fire.